confirmation hearings for the post of Attorney General on Capitol Hill. That's what you're looking at. Now, his selection is raising some eyebrows in Washington. In particular, his involvement in some very controversial pardons that were handed out at the end of the Clinton administration. Congressman Dan Burton is a Republican from Indiana. He has some serious objections to the confirmation of Holder. Now, you should know that the House does not weigh in on confirmation hearings, but the congressman knows Eric Holder very well from Holder's time as President Clinton's Deputy Attorney General. Congressman, good morning to you.
Hi, Megan. How are you? I'm
fine, thanks. All right, so you outlined in great detail some of your objections to Eric Holder, and first and foremost on your list was the pardon that came literally in the 11th hour of President Clinton's term, a couple hours before he left the White House, of Mark Rich. For our viewers who don't know who Mark Rich is, just very quickly tell us who he is and why the pardon was controversial.
Oh, he was a man that was second on the most wanted list by the FBI for a long time. He was a big tax cheat, and he did a lot of business with Saddam Hussein and with illegal oil purchases and transactions. And he was really being chased by the FBI. And Holder worked with Jack Quinn and others to get this guy pardoned right as the president was leaving office. As a matter of fact, we had hearings on this. I was chairman of the Government Reform Committee, and there's no question in my mind that Holder was instrumental in getting that pardon.
Well, that's the thing. People were so outraged about this pardon that Congress held hearings on it, even though they could do nothing about it. But Democrats and Republicans were really ticked off this guy who allegedly billed taxpayers out of $48 million, 51 counts of tax fraud, did deals allegedly with Iran during the hostage crisis and so on, gets a pass from President Clinton. Why do you say that Eric Holder, who was one man down from Janet Reno, basically, in the Justice Department, why was he to blame for the Mark Rich pardon?
Well, he was the acting Attorney General when this pardon took place, and he wanted to be the next Attorney General. As a matter of fact, he had talked to Al Gore's supporters, suggesting that he'd like to have that job, and he had also talked to Jack Quinn about it, who ended up being Mark Rich's attorney. And I think he was negotiating for that position, and I think one of the quid pro quos was helping Mark Rich get that pardon, because Jack Quinn, who had been appointed Mark Rich's attorney, was his buddy and had worked at the White House. And so I think Eric was very ambitious, and I think he helped get Mark Rich pardoned so he could get the Attorney General slot should Al Gore win.
And there were questions at the time about whether Mark Rich essentially bought his pardon, because his wife had given almost $500,000 to the Clinton Library. She had made donations to Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign and so on. So there were real questions about whether there was any sort of a quid pro quo between the Clintons and Mark Rich. The thing about the Attorney General's office, Congressman, correct me if I'm wrong, is those are the people's lawyers. Those are not the president's lawyers. The president has a separate set of lawyers called White House counsel. If you're at the Attorney General's office, you're supposed to be representing the people and looking out for us, not looking out for the president.
Well, I look at it like a Supreme Court justice. The Attorney General is supposed to be representing the people and not showing favoritism to anybody. And when he was acting Attorney General and he did this quote-unquote favor for Mark Rich, I think he really disqualified himself from further consideration for Attorney General.
You know, Congressman, he was behind a couple of other controversial pardons, including of this FALN group, 16 terrorists from Puerto Rico, and some other things down the list. But still, when you talk to people on Capitol Hill, they say, yeah, you know, how big a deal is that going to be today before the Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and does it really jeopardize his nomination? What do you say?
Well, I really don't know. I sent all of the information from our hearings over to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Leahy and the others, and I hope they'll look at that and ask those questions of Mr. Holder, because this is very serious. He's going to be the Attorney General for the next 4 years should he be confirmed, and I think the Attorney General ought to be somebody that you can count on who won't be showing favoritism.
Interesting. Congressman Dan Burton, thanks so much for sharing your views on it with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hearing's going to start in a couple minutes. And by the way, we mentioned earlier the Dow futures are down sharply. That was the case earlier today, but not so much anymore. They're paring back those losses.
Okay.
And so, therefore, we expect, well, maybe